Hey, good day, everybody. Welcome to podcast number 4. And to me, this is going to be the most fun to date because I've got two dear friends, and I say that lovingly and respectfully because in my 2 short years in the corridor, I got a chance to meet Beth and Andy pretty early on, and what I found was I kept coming back to Hillsborough Community College and the innovation lab, and that's what you're seeing here. And so I just felt like these two are going to be the perfect guests for the next one. So Andy and Beth, welcome. Thanks for being a part of this.
Wow, that's a lot of pressure you just dumped on us there, Paul. We're going to be the perfect guest. But in all seriousness, thank you so much, Paul, for everything that you and the corridor do each and every day. We're just gratified to contribute in our small way. And for those of you that don't know me, my name is Andy Gold. I'm a full-time faculty member at Hillsborough Community College. And as Paul mentioned, the co-founder of the InLab at HCC, where we are right now.
I'm Beth Kerly, and yes, I am Andy's partner in crime here at the InLab, and really love doing what we do, building things, scaling things, and getting it out to our community. So I'm really excited to be here and be able to talk about it today.
Yeah. So no, and thank you. So let the crowd know a little bit about what the Innovation Lab is, kind of what you do, and how you see yourselves fitting in your niche in this world.
When we first started working in the, shall we call it, the entrepreneurship space, about 8 or 9 years ago, Tampa's entrepreneurial ecosystem was just starting out. We had noticed it both locally as well as nationally that more and more people were becoming interested in entrepreneurship. And so we decided that we wanted to increase the entrepreneurship program at Hillsborough Community College. And here's the reason why. Our place is almost like Switzerland. A community college doesn't compete within an ecosystem. And it seemed at the time that there were these varying entities that were serving the same purpose. And we looked for collaboration. And I think that that's why we saw the success that we did in such a short period of time, is because the community college is a place that, first of all, is open access, that we don't compete with anybody. We're an educational nonprofit entity with a very important mission of community building. So those things all coupled together gave us a place in the ecosystem. And then we started building programming around that and to what the InLab is today, which I think you can take.
Okay.
Did I set you up all right there?
You sure did, partner. That was awesome. So yeah, I think everything Beth said led to the ultimate design of the InLab at HCC. I think our mission is really, because of the inclusive nature of community college, as Beth just mentioned, is really to scale our impact and create equity for everybody and prosperity through entrepreneurship education. And that may not mean necessarily starting a business. It may mean developing entrepreneurial competencies that can enable you to be more competitive in the workforce today. So our center is really designed to fill a multitude of need states. We have our core academic programs for college credit, from a 1-semester certificate that can be completed in 16 weeks, all the way up to 2-year terminal degrees, associate degrees in entrepreneurship. We have a whole bunch of community programming, which, Paul, you've been a participant in several of those. From free workshops we offer every month, about 30 of them through our virtual campus, all the way through these events. Paul was at the Patent-thon. He was a keynote speaker at our Veterans Entrepreneurship Training Symposium. So we try to reach people at no cost and make them aware of our community that we've built, but also more importantly, connect people into other people's communities that can really enable their ability to grow faster. The third thing we do is we have a very core building block with our work with military veterans and their family members. We have a unique partnership with Syracuse University's Institute for Veterans and Military Families, IVMF. We are a spoke on a national SBA grant that they received. And we do a lot of work to help support veterans, their family members, to explore and dive into the world of entrepreneurship. And veterans, by far, make awesome entrepreneurs. Veterans, in fact, just to give you a data point, are 41% more likely to pursue self-employment when compared with non-veterans. So there's sort of like a natural tendency towards self-employment. The last thing we do is our research institute, where we deliver professional development training to educators, both in the secondary K-12 realm as well as post-secondary college realm. And then I'll kick it back to Beth to talk about the three things that really support all of our efforts that kind of are underneath those four pillars.
You notice that the InLab, we leave out the word entrepreneurship. It's the Interdisciplinary Institute for Innovation. And that was done on purpose because, again, we are a community college. We want to reach as many students as possible. And we feel that there's ideas that are all around us, but are not being acted upon because of this barrier of thinking I have to start a business to do that. So the way that the InLab was set up with the pillars that Andy just discussed with free workshops and with events is to kind of put a net out there to grab people that may not see entrepreneurship as the end goal. They just maybe have an idea that they would like to see taken somewhere. But in order for us to be able to support all of that, we have to have lay the groundwork. And so those three things include the access to mentors and students who come through the program, whether it be the credit program or non-credit program, are given access to mentorship. And we know that businesses fail within the first 5, 7, and 10 years. So we've structured mentoring around those points where businesses begin to fail. We also have access to funding, which is very unique. And actually, in any educational institution, generally what you'll see for funding is pitch competitions and lots of pitch competitions. And Andy and I saw early on when we were doing them that just a little bit of money, $500, $1,000, $2,000, was making a huge difference in the very early stages of these businesses. So we started ideating early on, how do we get little bits of money into the hands of these very early stage startups? And a serendipitous event happened where we just happened to meet two people that had the same vision as Andy and I. And the Everyday Entrepreneur Venture Fund is what it's called. And these two actually it was four at the time, generous people put together this fund. HCC was the first among 4 colleges to receive $250,000 that is intended to be used for these very early stage startups in order to take away the barrier of starting a business that has to do with finance and financial constraints. And it's been very, very successful. And I know we'll dive into that deeper probably on the podcast here, so I won't do that right now. And then the last thing is ongoing support, and that support again through workshops and through keeping track of our students and those student businesses through the lens of their finances. How are they doing? Staying on top of them, making decisions based on real numbers versus gut feelings, or kind of the sexy part of business, which has to do with your marketing, or I want to pitch competition, those types of things. So we're there. We're a part of the community, and we remain a part of the community for these businesses.
Beth, I love your Switzerland idea, and I've used that from a corridor perspective as well. We're not. I love all the counties of the 23. I love all the ecosystems that are out there, and the power in Florida, as you see at the deck plate level, sorry, that's my Navy getting in there, at the ground level. Where to me, that's one of the things that I love about a community college kind of engagement with the community. We talk in the corridor about community-driven innovation, and it starts, I think, at the community level. So I think that's great. You brought up, so let's turn to the education piece. And there's something you said that I thought was really interesting that 2 years ago I would have thought, I'm not quite sure I understand that. And it's the idea of the value of an entrepreneurship education, in that it may not mean you want to start a business. What I've learned is there are elements to entrepreneurial education, and that's one of your 4 pillars, that can be valuable for all of us. Can you dig in on that piece for a little bit?
Go ahead.
I guess I'll start. So, we did some research several years ago about the skills gap, which is pretty, there's a lot of scholarship and research around that issue. It's a pretty prominent and well-defined one. But in talking with employers up and down the East Coast, we unearthed something that we thought was kind of interesting. When we would ask the complaining employers that kept saying, gosh, college graduates just lack the skills that we're looking for, and it's really frustrating to us. And we asked them, well, what exactly are those skills? One of the skills, in different terms, that kept coming up was problem finding skills. At a college or academic institution, problem solving is thought to be a really critical skill that we need to teach students to become good at. But it's really not valued all that much by employers. What is valued, because problem solving is relatively easy once you know what the problem is. It's finding problems early on before they fester and become much more costly to repair. So when we heard that, we're like, wow, that's all we're teaching students to do, is find problems in society, in the world, that they can hopefully build a business around and come up with something that can make people's lives better. There were other things that they shared with us as well that really synced into these entrepreneurial core competencies. So we felt like we needed to kind of rebrand what entrepreneurship education is. And how we rebranded it was, we said it's kind of like a 21st century business administration degree. It's not necessarily for someone who has to start or wants to start a business, although many do. It's really for somebody that wants to add value to the employer that is hiring them, and be able to have that impact right away. And that's really what we focus mostly on in our delivery of our education.
Well, let me ask you this. To be a part of the innovation lab, to connect with you all, do I have to already be a student at Hillsborough Community College to reach in, or how does that happen?
No, the answer to that is no. We built it that way because we know that innovation happens with more than one mind. First of all, that takes collisions. We have to have good space for those collisions to happen. Second of all, we already mentioned not everyone wants to be an entrepreneur. And lastly, this is an interdisciplinary institute. So we find a way for everyone to be able to connect, whether they're a student, a community member. We have our veteran non-credit program. So they're students, but not students of HCC necessarily, getting a credit certificate. You talked at the very top of this podcast about how once you hear Beth and Andy and you reach out to them, that you will be forever linked. That's true, because we keep everyone a part of our network so that we can keep adding value to our students and to the people that we serve. So that could be value to the student themselves because of any expertise that a community member is willing to share. And then we always feel that it's important to recognize those that are volunteering their time to us. So we give them that platform that maybe is helping out a business that maybe is in year 5. And this is a great way for them to be able to get some promotions and give back. So it's just this network that we continue to keep this synapses firing off, trying to keep everyone engaged.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add to that, Paul, by saying that interdisciplinary piece is really, really important to our mission. We don't want somebody who's animated by science, who wants to be a dancer, who wants to be a musician, to be crowded out from coming into our space, because if we just have like-minded, like, oh, I want to start a startup people in our world, then very little is ever going to get accomplished. So what we have to do is we've got to bring in people, as Beth said, across different academic disciplines to accelerate the envelope of innovation. And it's worked magically for us so far. And it's been really cool to have people who think differently, come from different backgrounds, have different passions working together. So it's been really cool. So we have an all hands on deck approach to what we do. So we know that for us to be successful in what we're trying to do, we have to educate educators who are not business minded, who are science faculty, psychology faculty, English for academic purposes faculty, to learn about what an entrepreneurial mindset is, what design thinking is, and so forth. So we offer this training, and we've built an army, a small one so far, but an army of what we call edupreneurs in residence at our college. So what happens is, let's say there's an environmental science teacher who's teaching a class, and what normally would happen is a student that's brave enough to share an idea that they have for some new invention or something like that will go up to the teacher and say, hey, can I talk to you about this idea? And the teacher will politely listen and say, that sounds great, you should go for it. But now what's happening is that teacher that's come through one of our trainings is able to sit down with that student, have a much more meaningful conversation about what the problem is that student's trying to solve, how to build some shape and structure to it through business modeling. And we're really gratified that we've been able to kind of have that all hands on deck approach to really scale our ability to have impact.
Yeah, I think that cannot be overstated, what you just said about what we talk about in the corridor about boundary breaking collaboration. The idea that, you sort of check your ego, you check your own sort of biography at the door, you come in and you realize that the creativity that's about to happen with the group, whatever group that is, um, will be magical. Again, I love this is what draws me back to the InLab, and kind of you're doing that research piece. So it's not just anecdotal. You have real world kind of research going on and experiments, and you're data driven, and you're looking at national programs as well. So I'm afraid if I talk too much, your egos will be so thoroughly inflated that you'll disappear from my screen. So I'll stop that piece. But I do want to tell us a little bit about the Patent-thon. So walk us through a little bit about that partnership that you had with NASA, because I just thought it was so unique to have a giant organization like NASA connect with Hillsborough Community College and the InLab. Walk us through that a little bit.
So I think it was during the summer of last year, NASA was doing their assessment of all the different areas in Florida and trying to kind of map the ecosystem. And they have a program called the Tech Transfer University, which is them taking their patents, working with colleges in order to get these technologies into companies, businesses built out of them, get them to market. And they had only been working with universities for the most part. I think there was close to 20 or more universities. And as they were mapping the ecosystem here in Tampa, I believe it was Softworks who said, you know what, you need to talk with Hillsborough Community College. Get a hold of Beth and Andy. They're doing some pretty cool things over there. And isn't that awesome, Paul? How there's the ecosystem at work. Normally, a community college would probably be left out of that conversation. You want education, has to do with patents and science and technology. Hey, you're going to go to USF, you're going to go to the four-year institutions, which are already part of TTU, by the way. So we get a phone call from NASA explaining what this thing is all about. And we said, well, we're interested. So Andy and I went to a conference over in Orlando, and we had the president of the National Association of Community College Entrepreneurship with us. And we asked the NASA representative to come and sit with us and let's just brainstorm some ideas. So we were doing that. And this idea of a patent-thon came up. We were thinking of a hackathon or a walkathon, like something that's really intense in a short period of time and just see what happens. And the idea was, for the patent-thon, the basis of it, was use the United Nations Global Sustainable Development Goals as a basis. The reason that we're coming together, let's solve problems. And then from there, have design thinking as the methodology of how we're going to come up with ideas to solve these global problems. And then utilize, you notice this is last, utilize NASA patented technologies as one of the means by which we could solve that problem and build a business model around it. And this was very different. When we pitched this to NASA, they're used to going to universities with the patent. Here it is, the professor vets it, puts it out to their graduate students and seeing what kind of companies can be built. And so this was very unique. And we had teams that did not know one another. Some teams came and they knew who each other was, but for the most part, and I do believe our placing teams, the ones that won, they didn't know each other when they walked in the door. And it just proved how these great ideas can happen in just a serendipitous way, that when you come in not knowing anything and not having preconceived ideas, that innovation can be accelerated. And that's exactly what happened.
And I'll add my sort of 2 cents worth on this, and being a part of those phone calls. It highlights
You can add
what
10 cents.
okay. It highlights the really what I believe is a very unique culture throughout Florida. Very yes and very abundance, driven. This idea of it's not a scarcity thing. It's not I have this and you can't have it. It's it's bringing those folks together. And again, sort of that boundary breaking collaboration, deck plate community discussion. And then you've got the UN goals, these monster challenges that to me, as I looked in the eyes of the teams, and you're exactly right, these teams were coming together. They didn't know who's who for the most part. And being able to, tackle in a very short amount of time these monster problems with really, I think, just amazingly creative ideas. I just think was super.
Paul, I didn't want to underscore either sort of like an unseen huge benefit from the patent-thon, at least in the public didn't see it, which was I felt like we began to build meaningful relationships with all of these agencies that were part of the planning process. I mean, from you guys at the Corridor to Leslie and her team at SoftWorks to UF Innovate, USF and their Center for Entrepreneurship. You brought in Rollins College. I mean, it was just really, like, for us, very humbling to be able to be around, such esteemed people, but also to develop these friendships that have led to additional opportunities since the Patent-Thon, which has been just tremendous.
Yeah, and I think no, you're exactly right, Andy. One of the things you talked about are, for example, the UN goals, and some of the words you're using throughout this podcast have talked about a social nature, social entrepreneurship, and the desire of folks who are thinking about contributing. Um, and there's where we see groups like Rally over here, which is involved in investing in social entrepreneurs. Since you all are you're the point you're the point people out on the front end. Talk to this group a little bit about your maybe definition of social entrepreneurship, but then where you see these things going and connecting.
We've sort of parsed the world of social entrepreneurship into three buckets. So, social entrepreneurship, from our perspective, are for-profit businesses that leverage profits for social good. There's many examples of this that people might be familiar with, from Bomba's socks to Tom's shoes and so forth. The second piece are social enterprises. Now, social enterprises we look at as being more of a nonprofit agency that's doing equally as important work, but faces different challenges than a for-profit business. And then there's a third bucket, which we refer to as social innovation. So social innovation is neither starting a nonprofit or a for-profit, but rather taking an existing product or service and reimagining it in a way where it might have a more positive impact on the world. For example, plastic straws, okay, really bad for the environment. So somebody came up with an idea, hey, we can use paper and make paper straws. Now, I don't know if any of you have ever used a paper straw. I have. You get about 1.5 sips, and then it's like this nasty, like you're really not enjoying it at all. You're like, I'm going to chuck this thing and just drink out of the glass. So somebody came along and said, well, we can build on that and build a metal straw, right? Something that won't become saturated. So that's a small example of social innovation. The most important thing for your audience to be aware of, if they're not, and you've already heard this from us, Pauls, but I'll repeat it for your audience, is that for the first time in the history of the United States, the majority of the US population are millennials or younger. So this would include millennials, Gen Z, and the youngest generation born 2010 or later, which is Gen Alpha. And when you evaluate those three generational cohorts, you unearth some very interesting things. The first is by far the most educated generations in history that are or will be digital natives. We'll never remember a time where they didn't have connectivity to the internet. The second thing you observe is that those generations are the most inclusive generations. They're the most diverse generations. And most importantly, they are the most cause-focused generations. These are consumers of the future, some already millennials and some Gen Z consumers, but they're demanding companies to behave in a responsible fashion. And in fact, they're willing to pay more for a product or service from a company that's doing something cool in the world. So our view is, if you don't have some kind of authentic, purposeful, social cause to your business, you're going to get rolled over by a competitor that does. It's just a matter of time.
Remember when I mentioned, Paul, that we see things almost before they happen? And this is one of those things. As students are coming through the program and the more that we meet, we were seeing more social models. And so then we are seeing the data that's proving it. So
No, in fact, I washed my first metal straw from my daughter, and it's got this little. It actually has this little arc in it. It's pretty cool, on how that works, and so I think she's probably with you on this idea of paper just doesn't cut it. Um, and the other thing I would say is I have 5 pairs of Bombas socks, because of their message, right? You buy one and they donate one. And they're actually really good socks as well. And they're not a paid subscriber or anything. They're just good. They're just darn good socks. So
Paul,
no, I agree.
I want to just, I want to just mention one last thing before I forget, and I do forget at my age quite often now. So, one of our academic heroes who's no longer alive is this gentleman by the name of Ken Robinson. He has the most ever watched TED Talk. If no one's ever seen it, you should watch it. It's all about creativity and how traditional public education is just crushing creativity in young people today. But he has this really interesting line that is I'm paraphrasing, but it's something like, if you're not prepared to fail, you'll never do anything interesting in life. And I think that's the one thing that Beth and I and many other people that you are involved with are willing to do. Give things a go. They may not work out. We'll learn a lot through that process. We won't call it a failure. We'll call it a learning journey. And by giving things a go only helps to accelerate our ability to have an impact in the world. And I think from our perspective, that's our model. We pilot things. Some things work out. Some things don't work out. The things that do, we then look to scale in the state of Florida and beyond.
I do appreciate, Andy, what you just said about this last little piece about creativity and failure. The one of my mentors in the Navy was a guy by the name of Jim Hondo Gertz, who is well known in the Tampa area when he was down at SOCOM. And he constantly, in fact, he would incentivize the people that would work for him to make sure one of their goals had a 50-50 shot of failing. And if they came into him and said, and here's my 50-50 shot, if he sniffed out that that's too easy, he'd tell him. He'd say, no, that's not stretching enough. And so the environment that you create, in Strive and in all the other programs is just fantastic. Anything else for this? Any saved, as we would say, saved rounds for this group before I sort of pull it to a close?
I believe that part of the culture that we exhibit here and that we try to put out to the rest of the community, and it does have to do with failure, but you can't fail unless you take action. So we're very action oriented. Andy brought this to me. I think it was a part of his New York state of mind of, just stop talking. Let's just do it. Just do it. And we have built that, and that's baked into every single thing that the InLab does. I bring to the table this strategy. I always remember who we are. We are an educational institution, and I always bring everything back to that. So when you look at the relationship between Andy and I and why does it work, it's because we're action oriented. We do have focus. I think some people think we don't, but we really do. There is strategy behind every decision that we make, and it's about community building, uplifting communities, taking action, and not being afraid to fail. So those things all are baked into every program that we offer.
Andy, I'll just pile on that one about my own learning journey in the corridor, and the fact that technology for technology's sake misses the point. It really is about community building. That's what we do. And we do it through this world of education and experiment and demonstration and fun and engagement. And I think there is something to this sort of post-COVID wanting to get out there and realizing that the status quo, which we've been living through, is not good enough. And there are so many other things that we can do. So with that, I will turn it back over to the team. Thanks for everybody listening. We enjoy your comments. Please give those to us, and we'll look for other leaders like Beth and Andy to have on the show. With that, have a great day, everyone.